It's been almost 4 months to the day since artist, activist, and educator Hope McMath was removed from her role as an AP art history teacher at Duval County Schools, and the schools district began an investigation into controversial social media posts. The investigation is over, but she's still not teaching. Here to tell us why, we're joined by Hope McMath. Good morning, Hope. Thanks for being here.
Good morning, Ann. Glad to be here.
We're also joined by Hope's attorney, John Phillips. John, welcome back.
Good morning.
So, posts following Charlie Kirk's shooting death on September 11th, that was sort of the genesis of this, at least initially, as far as we know. So, you were officially removed September 15th
Yes, that's correct.
from your role, and you teach AP Art History at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. Um, this is a issue that has gotten a lot of media attention. You all did a press conference in December about a lawsuit that you have filed against the school district for violating your First Amendment rights and your 14th Amendment rights of equal protection. So catch us up a little bit on where we are now, because this press conference in December that you held seemed to kickstart some resolution with your investigation with the school district.
Correct. And so I was removed from the schools on September 15th, put on reassignment, which is sort of its own interesting story, what it means to be reassigned when you're a teacher pulled out of the classroom. That initial complaint was through Duval County Public Schools. We learned very early on that the complaint originated with the Moms for Liberty group here in Duval County. But that complaint also within a couple of days went up to the state level, which is in part of the process. And so just to be clear, I was under investigation with both Duval County Public Schools, but also with the State Board of Education. A lawsuit did ensue when it was clear that this wasn't, one, going to be quick, and two, started to become more clear what I was targeted for and by whom I was targeted. And that lawsuit includes Duval County board members, State Board of Education, as well as members of Moms for Liberty. Since then, right before the holiday break for the schools, John and I got to spend more time with our investigator team here in Duval County, who are terrific professionals. We've been kind of fortunate, I think, to have the people that we've had. And they made clear that the case with Duval County Public Schools is now wrapped up and closed.
Which sounds like a good thing, right?
Yes, they did find substantiation, and John will go more into this, but I basically, after being out of school for 4 months, the only thing that they ended up sticking with out of a very voluminous original complaint was some use of profanity on my private social media pages, most of it contained within works of art. And so we were hopeful that at that point it was then going to mean it was basically a little slap on the hand. And, we were hoping I'd go back into the classroom, which has been one of our goals through this entire thing, is getting me reinstated.
Because to be clear, they were in their disposition of this case. They weren't saying we're going to keep you out of the classroom. They said that our investigation is over. You've made some minor violations,
Right.
in terms of using profanity.
Correct. So as a result, though, they said at that same hearing that they were not going to reinstate me to the classroom because I'm under investigation with the state. So even though Duval County Public Schools has basically cleared the decks of this case, I am still under investigation with the state. So I am still out of the classroom, which is most important when it comes to the learning of my students.
And we'll talk more
Yes.
about that for sure. But John, if the school district has done its investigation and come back with a finding that there was some violations of, kind of conduct and
Right.
appropriate language, what more would the state be looking for? What more could the state possibly find?
Political weaponization, perhaps. I'm just going to be clear about that. The Duval County Public Schools are the ones that these complaints start with. And while I could mince words with what Thomas Caggiano said, including the B word, and what Hope said, including the B word, and how Thomas Caggiano was found to have been issued hundreds of thousands of dollars for his lawsuit when he was unfairly suspended. But regardless, at all meetings with the DCPS, they said it was non-disciplinary, non-stacking. This was over. She needed to be coached. And they said, and we just coached you. And then, we're like, all right, we won, 5 days after our press conference. The other teacher I represent was immediately reinstated the following Monday after the press conference. And so we're like, well, this is good. We've got some, attrition. We're moving the ball down the field. And then DCPS in one line in her letter basically says, but, there's still the state investigation. And the state investigation is caught up in an administrative court case, which would then have to be appealed. And so we're going to amend our federal lawsuit, seek an immediate injunction to get her placed back into school based upon DCPS's findings alone. They did an investigation. They were the only ones that even tried to meet with Hope, and we spent hours talking to them.
You mentioned Thomas Caggiano. He is a teacher that had been removed from the classroom. This was about 5 years ago. He'd posted very nasty comments about the LGBTQ community and the trans community. It seems like a different time, but his administration, suspended him for that. He ultimately sued the school district.
Right.
And as it happens, it was just a couple months ago that the school district had to pay out nearly $400,000 to this teacher for removing him because of his social media posts. Can you remind us a little bit about what the law says when it comes to teachers and what they can say publicly about matters of public import?
Certainly. Matters of public import, protected political speech is always protected. Just keep it out of the classroom, right? Mm-hmm. What you do on your social media, what you do, on your private time is more important now than ever. We can't be yelling at each other and then have our educators just, blindfolded in a gag around their mouth saying you can't participate in the political process because you might have a student that could possibly see it, which is kind of the standard here, and that doesn't apply. These are government jobs, which is important to emphasize, Ann, because that means that the government is the one doing the censoring of the speech, and that's absolutely prohibited. And, Pickering versus Board of Education, was the very first U.S. Supreme Court case that really dealt into this because it was political speech.
It was the teacher who wrote a letter to the editor of the local newspaper.
Correct, trying to whistleblow. And they suspended him, and then they said, wait. You still have the right to write the newspaper. You still have the right to do things. And even during the meeting with DCPS and Hope, there was this back and forth about art versus speech, and Hope was like testing them. Hey, but what if it's a billboard? What if it's a piece of art? What if a student walks in there? Like, what if a student walks by? Well, if a student walks by a classroom, that means that teacher's on Facebook in the classroom. That's that teacher's problem. There is never 100% clear. There has never been a scintilla of an allegation or anything that said Hope did anything wrong in the classroom, that any student or parent complained about her. This was generated by a 501c4 Moms for Liberty, which is aligned with the political views of Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point. They're connected to the point that even the Moms for Liberty school board members wore what during that very same school board meeting where they voted on Thomas Caggiano's settlement? Turning Point T-shirts. Like, it's preposterous in its truthfulness.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to educator and activist Hope McMath about her removal from the classroom for social media posts. We're also talking to her attorney, John Phillips. We should mention that Phillips and Hunt is an underwriter for WJCT. But you are welcome to join our conversation. You can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also go to firstcoastconnect.org and find all the ways that you can connect with us. We've got a call from Wells on the South Side. Good morning, Wells. Go ahead.
Good morning, Ann and Hope and John. Good morning to all three of you.
Good morning.
Part of what's happening in the country today is the elimination or the working towards privatization of education. And one of the tactics they're using is an attack on our freedom of speech. And that's one of the things that's happening with Hope McMath and the reason she's not back in her classroom, which has done tremendous harm to her students. And the other teacher who was pulled out of her class, one of her students actually had to be hospitalized. What we're seeing is a full-throated attack on the education system as we know it. I have been going to school board meetings and city council meetings regarding this issue. We have a picket line outside of the school board headquarters at every meeting that they have. The meeting starts at 6, and we have a picket line from 5 until 6. The absence of teaching Black history is an issue that's affecting and harming the African American community. So I want to thank Hope and John for putting this issue front and center, and we will be continuing to support protecting our public schools. So I just want to leave it at that for now and say we're behind you. I'm part of Take Them Down, and it's a coalition that's being built. So keep up the fight. We're there with you.
Thank you, Wells.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Wells. I want to ask about that, Hope, because I know you've discussed in the past the chilling effect that this has had on teachers that you know. And Wells mentioned teaching Black history, teaching African American history. The rules around that have changed in Florida, and in terms of teaching anything in the classroom that can kind of cause one student to feel bad about what it is that they're learning. There's, all kinds of restrictions that have been placed on that. But you have actually known teachers who have stopped teaching certain subjects because they're so concerned about running afoul of some of these new rules and guidelines or getting a complaint generated from a student in the classroom, things that include things like slavery.
That's right. And if we can sort of go back a couple of years and look at sort of the birth of this kind of, quote, anti-woke agenda that the state of Florida, from a government standpoint, began to take up, it started by attacking critical race theory, which of course wasn't being taught in K-12 schools anyway. It was a very specific kind of curriculum at the university level. And then it started to sort of creep into how or if Black history could be taught in the schools. And because teachers were starting to get targeted by sometimes students and many times forces outside of their classroom, many teachers just said, there's parts of this I'm just not going to teach, or I'm going to teach it real different than what I've done in the past, and water down the kind of truth telling that typically happens in an art classroom or a history classroom or a philosophy classroom or a sociology classroom or a literature classroom. I know teachers who have changed what books they teach. We know books have been taken off the shelves in schools. They've been banned in libraries. And those things are having an impact on a lot of my peers, both in the K-12 space, but also in the university space. And that, I don't think we should, I think we have to pay really close attention to that, because we are really then talking about not teaching a true and honest history and true and honest content to millions of young people. That does not bode well for our future as a society. Sometimes those lessons are hard. Literature can be really hard to read. American history is complicated, difficult, and full of trauma. But we have to sort of look at that wretchedness, understand where it comes from, understand how it came to be. What does the healing from that look like, right? Those are the kind of lessons we want our students leaving school with. And if teachers are petrified because they see their peers being taken out of the classroom and fearful for losing their livelihood, it's very serious. And I don't know of another sector of people who are being so heavily impacted at this moment.
We've got a call from Susan in Mandarin. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to first say that I very much appreciate what Hope and her attorney are doing for our country. Maybe I should keep it to our county, but people should be able to speak up about policy issues, and teachers should not be silenced about how they feel about various policies. But my question is, I know school board members were named in the lawsuit, and I wonder if they did anything specific that made them be named in the lawsuit.
That's a good question, Susan. To her point, John, there are a number of school board members, 5 of them, all endorsed by Moms for Liberty. The lawsuit also names Moms for Liberty, Duval, and
Right.
National. But why are they being individually named? Is it because of their association with Moms for Liberty?
It's because they were acting as individuals, acting in furtherance of Moms for Liberty, wearing shirts that were Turning Point branded shirts, and choosing speech. Moms for Liberty Brevard is a spinoff of Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty Brevard sued because the Brevard County school system, the school board, was restricting one side of speech. And what we have here is school board members promoting Christian conservative speech from the dais while choosing to give Moms for Liberty a 6-minute platform reading that extra email.
People who may not know,
Right.
they did read into the record this email that they received from Moms for Liberty complaining about Hope, which is
Like,
why they're
excoriating Hope, like making her this wicked witch, and again continuing these taglines of woke and the same things that and again, I say I'm not Republican, I'm Democrat, I'm reasonable. Try to take a reasonable look at things, and there's too much fight. Like, why do we have to attack each other? That was the beautiful thing about the last week is, whether you're into sports or not, we all had something to root for that was together, right? And as I said in the press conference probably 10 times, the pendulum swings both ways. And so if you think Moms for Liberty is on your side and that's your speech, just wait, because it's going to change. And we can't limit speech. And so the school board members, and it's going to get a little bit more complicated as we go, because I have a feeling discovery is going to reveal that they were pushing the buttons a lot more than a school board member should. But they're certainly their oaths, their ties, and their promotion of that particular Moms for Liberty Turning Point branded speech, when we're talking about a political attack that was begun because of the death of Charlie Kirk. Nothing else. DCPS rebranded this as a cursing issue to get away from the politics. Some smart lawyer was like, "Yo, get away from the Charlie Kirk stuff. Let's just
that's
pick a
interesting
word."
because one of the posts that had caused consternation that initially sparked this deeper dive into your previous posts unrelated to Charlie Kirk was a post that had to do with karma. Karma is a B word. And in their investigation, the school district didn't take issue with the karma part, sort of this offensive political
Right.
or maybe not, recognizing the gravity of a killing enough, but it was the B word that they censured you for.
No, that's right. It really came down to profanity. And, I think it's important to give this a little further context. When I was first sort of pulled out of the classroom and made to report around this complaint, the parts of the complaint that were shared with us, and we have actually yet to see the full and complete complaint. So that is an important point to also make. But what was shared with us was not only the Karma is a Bee post that I made after Charlie Kirk, which actually it's a larger post than that and a larger conversation, but the shorthand of it, we'll use that for right now. But I was also asked to give testimony around material evidence that included posts that spoke up for transgender people, posts that spoke up for Black history, posts that spoke up for people in Gaza. This was not just a single post. It's like 20 plus pages. And so when you start to add and stitch those together with the 6-minute reading of a letter by one of our school board leaders into the record, it became clear that it was an attack against the way I move through this world and the fact that I choose to share my ideas on humanity on my private social media pages, and that those ideas and ideals are counter to a lot of what Moms for Liberty holds dear.
which 100% goes against the Caggiano case and the precedent. Again, this is the precedent. They've settled it. Caggiano said, I think about Hillary Clinton, teach this childish nasty B a lesson, have her treasonous A removed from office and put in jail. Curse words, folks, curse words on private social media.
Which, he was suspended, and then the school
Reinstated
district had to pay a
and
bundle.
paid the attorney's fees. Yeah, and so, if this is the road we want to go down, but to the school board members, the general counsel, anybody going back and listening to this show now or, in Discovery, remember this point. This is why this shouldn't go this way.
We've got a call from Yali in St. Augustine. Good morning, Yali. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Yoli from Springfield, and I'm calling to show support for no problem, for Hope McMath. I'm glad that you are having this particular subject this morning. Hi, Hope. Thank you, Mr. Phillips, for taking this case. I'm a local business owner, and I teach Black history on in the public sector because of the attack on, history and things along this line. And I praise Hope for, really sacrificing herself, her career. I've known her a long time, and I admire her. I support you, Hope, 100%. But I'm also, left with the thought of thinking that if this has come down to a profane word, we have profanity coming out of the halls of 1600 Pennsylvania Street from the highest corridors in American politics, and so it strikes as being disingenuous for that to be the cause. But as a small business operator, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, I think this is wrong, and that the First Amendment, her First Amendment rights should be protected. Because if not for her, then who's next? And that's my comment.
Yoli, thank you for your call. Yoli from Springfield. I want to ask you, John, because we also got a question on Facebook about a case out of Tennessee where a university professor was fired over Charlie Kirk comments. They're being forced to pay about $500,000 to that professor. Does that case, Jim on Facebook wants to know, have any bearing on Hope's case?
Bearing, yes. Precedent, no. And I'll also add, and this you consider this what it is. I'm 3 times board certified with 8 law licenses. My hourly rate is more than that attorney's. I don't want it. We want to donate some of this money back. Like, this isn't for the money. This is for the precedent. But yeah, sometimes school board members and where they're headed with doing a 501c4's bidding. And I'm going to add one more point. In Haley Bartlett's case, again, non-sustained. She was back in school for reposting something about Charlie Kirk.
This was your other client that's suing
Correct.
The school district.
They told her during her closing that they didn't know the name of the person who made the complaint, and it was just some anonymous email. So that means anybody with the ability to set up an email account on Gmail could make a complaint, the Friday before little Johnny has a test, and technically every time that suspension should be indefinite. And it's a terrible precedent. And I told him during the meeting, I was like, you can't do this. Like, it's one thing if you have a parent or a teacher or a student complain. Which was all about Thomas Caggiano's case. Like, there were kids that were really upset because of the way he treated them in class.
Kids that changed their classroom in order to not be in his class because they found his attitude towards LGBTQ students so offensive. And
he would blatantly kind of mock pronouns and do things in class that parents were gravely concerned. And this is completely different with both of these. Again, we haven't seen a precedent on the other side where any teacher, any employee, any state employee has not won so far.
Hope, I want to ask you, because you're talking about what we're teaching kids, and I know that, art history has, like other disciplines, but it has a lot of complicated elements. Art history is looking back at not just a lot of pretty pictures, but about social movements and changing times that were radically affected by art, that influenced art. And you're teaching about all of this. And I would guess it makes it harder to teach about that topic when you're facing kind of what you're facing, which is pushback on the nature of your speech in a political realm.
I mean, it can, except, I want to be clear. Nobody has come at me for what I'm teaching in my classroom. The fact is, the people who made the complaint have no idea what happens in my classroom. This didn't come from students. It didn't come from parents. It didn't come from my admin or my peers. But it is interesting to be teaching something like advanced placement art history at this moment, because my curriculum, which is a national curriculum that is also approved by the state, covers 25,000 years of art history, right? So it's a curriculum where works of art deal with everything from, religion to power to times of war, times of peace, social issues. So it's an incredibly rich kind of content to have during what is a tumultuous time, I think, in our country right now. And my students respond to it so beautifully. They're so curious, not just about the history of these art objects, but of why they're relevant to them today. And it's not my job to tell them why they're relevant today. That is their own work and their work of discovery. Now, yes, we do look at examples in the curriculum where we can point specifically to works of art that meant one thing at one time and that changed over time depending on the political, often the social political context of it, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned one piece in particular that has gone through kind of a revolutionary change, and that's the Mile in Vietnam Memorial.
That's right. The Vietnam War Memorial, probably many people listening to this have seen it or know of it. It's one of the memorials on the Mall at Washington, D.C., and it was incredibly controversial at the time that it was built and at the time that the design was chosen. So this would be around 1980, 1982, right? So less than a decade after the end of the Vietnam War. It was controversial because the design is black slabs of granite that have etched into its surface about 58,000 names of soldiers who were killed during the Vietnam conflict or are still considered missing. It's controversial because when we think about memorials and monuments, we think of men on horseback, right? We think of things like that Andrew Jackson travesty that sits in the middle of Jacksonville. But this memorial lacked images of people. It was about recognizing names, and it's this black stone that sort of cuts into the landscape in a way that looks like an open wound. And people at first hated it. They also disliked that an Asian young woman was also brought on to do that project. And of course, now it is beloved, it is revered, and considered a sacred space.
It is an interesting frame for a conversation that will continue. We really appreciate the update today. Hope McMath, John Phillips, thank you so much for coming on today and helping us understand the latest on this.
Thank you.